Welcome to the Spaceman. I'm Nick Gregorio, joined by
Phil Larigo.
Cooper Hagedorn. Hello.
I was waiting for that Cooper Hagedorn to drop in. And today we're going to be talking a little Resident Evil 7 and kind of horror games in general. Nick and I had the pleasure of fucking with a little of the Resident Evil 7 in VR yesterday. And I will say, lives up to expectation of a VR scary experience in the very early first chapter.
I need to ask this question. Who has ever watched a horror movie, I don't know, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or one of the Halloweens or Friday the 13th and was like, why can't I be in there in the house being chased and murdered? Like, it is that's the level of,
Yeah.
that's the experience you're getting with Resident Evil 7.
So how far did you get?
So we didn't,
Tell them how far you got.
Unfortunately,
in the
we
game.
got bumped because there was a live stream, but we'll kind of take them through the early parts. But it starts off again. We'll go more experience because
it's real creepy.
The storyline
First
is
of all,
like
PSVR. Big up to that. Coop's always hyping it. I got to play it at his house. That thing's amazing. That thing looks good. The design of it is dope.
It's a future head piece.
So at certain points where it's just cutscenes, it plays them as like you're watching a movie screen.
A giant movie
but
screen.
you feel like you're standing in front of an 80-inch TV, like standing in front of a movie theater. So you're already immersed.
So there's a lot of cutscenes.
It just opens with like a series of like a story beats, story developments. But once you're in it, you're in it, so definitely.
Yeah, so Nick was playing first, and I guess one of the kind of hiccups that is a deal breaker for a lot of people is that it makes you, some people say it makes you nauseous. Because the way the controls work is...
I was feeling it a little bit.
Yeah, you play it with the controller, it's not with the move, and again, like we have a Vive here, if anyone is used to Oculus or anything with room tracking, like you're not really getting that. But the control scheme for Resident Evil 7. So you stand still and the left stick, moves you while the right stick looks, but you also can look with your head. So it's a little redundant, and like Nick and I, we were trying to like figure out. I'm like,
and it's not like an FPS where it's smooth. It's very like it's centered.
It's like an 8-way
it's incremental,
click, which I don't like.
And the thing is, when you're in the house, when you get to the really like the haunted parts, you don't have to do that a lot. But to start the game out, and I guess to orientate yourself with this kind of fully immersive world, there's a lot of walking down paths, and I did get a little sick. I was a little like, Phil, I'm kind of feeling queasy.
And again, we probably got maybe 30 to 45 minutes on it, and the bummer is that it was right when everything was starting to take off in the game, but
having to go upstairs the first time, you're like, no, I don't want to do this.
And this stuff, it tricks the caveman part of your brain, just like, a lot of good VR where you're like, I can touch that. That's a guy's head. I'm going to fucking die, but...
Graphics are great. The graphics are amazing. It's only limited by the resolution of the headset right now. You only start to see some pixels, but the graphics translate really well. And we have to give this warning to anyone that plays it. When Phil and I play, we both understand that you do not scare each other or do some fucked up shit to each other while playing this game.
No, there was a truce where I was like,
no.
You're not going to touch me? He's like, I'm not going to touch you. And then that was it. And then at one point, Nick's like, is that you making noise? And I'm like, no man, it's not me making noise. He's like, you want to give it your turn? And I was like, not really. If the first jump scares come, why don't you take that on?
You guys gave it such it's actually like a good thing, like a glowing recommendation in terms of how scary it was when I got in this morning, that I was like, I don't want that. Like, because like VR is that, it's like an amplification of like similar experiences that you've had like in movies or whatever. So like, if it's like a thing like the X-Wing game or whatever, I'm like, awesome, like that's what I want. I've always wanted to like not just watch a star fight, but like be in one. But like a horror is always kind of down on the list for me anyway. So
you never wanted
when you guys are like, it's scary, and I'm like, no, I don't.
You don't want to limp through a dirty kitchen with a guy with a meat cleaver coming after you. I'm always like, why can't I be the guy limping through a kitchen?
But there is that quality to it, though, right? Like, about once a year, I'll be like ready and into like horror movies, and there is that little thing in the back of your mind, like especially with like slashers and stuff like that, where you do have that little like kind of little kid thing where you're like, oh, if that were me, I would do that. Oh, you gotta hit him, slam the door on him or whatever. Like so, there's that. There's maybe this is that you can finally bring that to life.
Honestly, we really didn't get that much time with it. We really were trying. It was like a horror movie or a series of comedic events that wouldn't let us play it for a while.
Yeah, there was a lot of just like dumb technical difficulties, and we're like, this is either the universe telling us don't play this game, but we're like, fuck that. We're going to play this game, and one of us is going to have a heart attack. But
I know it's early on, but I could see this winning game of the year. It feels like a. It's a first time. Like again, when I played this, I'm like, this is the first time I've ever felt this in a game. Where a lot of the Vive stuff is more tech demo-y, and it's super immersive, and you're doing like a task. This. The design of the game, like I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I'm still intrigued. I still want to. There's a level of mystery to it. There's a level of investigation, and it's paced in such a way that's very satisfying.
Well,
we didn't do anything, but we felt like we did something.
Yeah, the difference with this, with so much stuff that's developed for the Vive or a lot of other VR platforms or demos or arcade units or whatever, is that those are VR experiences where this is a standalone game that you can play on your PlayStation, but also as a VR experience, as they're calling it. So when Nick was playing, I was like, all right, and he's like, whoa, man, the sun's still out as you're walking through the forest. Like, it's kind of creepy, and I'm like, puss. But then when we switched, he's like, hey, this doesn't look as scary when I'm watching the fucking TV, you know, because again, it tricks your brain in that sense. But
you got the headset. I mean, once you are locked in with the headset, you're there. You have your earphones in, and we turn the lights off in the room so you don't get any spill light. You don't get any of that.
Yeah.
I want to know who's playing this game by themselves, because I could not.
If you are or know someone, okay, first off, it's you. You're fucking madman, and I'm concerned about you.
You're a crazy person.
If you have a friend who's like, you played through Resident Evil last night, maybe you should not go to their place alone, or just let people know if you're going over their house. But I mean, the larger question here is, who is this for? Who is this VR experience for? And it kind of goes back to PT, which a lot of people, can see that Resident Evil 7 has drawn from PT, but maybe add a little bit more of a game or more, elements to it. I was like, I want to play PT in VR, and Nick famously said, no, you don't, because I played shittier graphics VR on the early Oculus development kit, and he's like, and that was
so scary.
Enough for me.
Dreadhalls on the early Oculus kit was so you're immediately consumed by your environment, even though the graphics don't look good. But you're like, oh man, there's this, and they're doing 3-dimensional sound, so you get stuff that's behind you and in front of you. When you have those headsets on, it's ASMR in the worst way. You're being completely like, I don't know. You're just like you're encapsulated in this horror, this world of horror.
So can I ask? And it seems like you guys were using the actual controller as opposed to the motion controllers, and you were standing as opposed to sitting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can sit or you can stand. I kind of went in as cold as I possibly could. But the control scheme I kind of took my cues from Nick, but what I was doing was moving with the left stick, like forward, back, and then as much as I could, turning my entire, like rotating on a dime to steer my character.
But you're not walking anywhere.
No, you're not walking anywhere.
Gotcha.
And that's where, kind of the opposite is when you're playing with the Vive, which has room tracking, like, you're moving and leaning and your entire body is going while this is.
But I will say this, and I've kind of talked about this before, is that the stakes are so high in this game. You know what I mean? Like everything, again, we spent 45 minutes playing basically the intro of the game, and the pace is much slower. You're moving. You're not like jogging through the world trying to like get things accomplished.
Right.
Like everything you do, you're like, oh, should I go in there? There's hesitation. There's moments where you're like, am I gonna go in this room and there's a dead body lying, or like you find a videotape and then you're like, oh, I get to go downstairs and put it in the VCR. Where normally in a game, I'm like, oh, I found the videotape, now I gotta go put it in the stupid VCR. Like it's just another dumb plot point that's gonna tell me. But this, the first person immersion makes everything heightened, makes everything, it does feel life or death as much as you can with a video game. It just doesn't feel like a game. You're not trying to plow through it to get to the good parts. It almost felt like every part was the good part. And maybe it gets redundant, I don't know.
Yeah, and some of the differentiators between this and some of the Vive stuff is like, it's a tech demo, right? I don't care if it's a under the sea whale viewing thing or, it's I think Sisters was one of the ones that came with the Vive or launched with it. And that's like It's a 2-minute experience. But this thing is like, you don't know, like, are they gonna rapid punch you? Are they gonna make you wait a half hour before you get a big one? And then like, you don't know what's coming and how frequently. So that's that unknown element of like what's, you know,
it's
because
great.
when I got the
It's
videotape, I'm like,
genuinely
great, now I have to
It's,
go downstairs and like, there's gonna be something when I put this in the tape behind me or this, and you kind of, it's almost that the anticipation is worse than the scares. It's just as bad as the scares.
And like, you
Can't
know,
say it's
normally
worse.
when you're playing a survival horror video game, you whip the right joystick around to look behind you if something's coming. Well, now it's you. So you get that sense that they're, you know, it's like being in a dream when you ever feel like you're ever stuck in a dream and you know something's there and you can't see it. Like you get that, it starts to like itch at that sense where you
sounds
can't,
awful. This
you
sounds
can't
so
look
fucking
everywhere
horrible. I'm sorry.
all at once. Like you can't cover all your bases.
Oh, God.
And then after a while, you're like, I haven't checked the door behind me, and now you're afraid to look because you're like, God forbid.
You don't want, you don't want to look. I was crouching through. I'm like, I feel safe or close to the floor. That's one less plane. But that was, you know, that sense of dread and that kind of claustrophobia that they're leaning on. It's again, we're only talking about the early parts of this game. It's not a full review. But in games like Outlast, where you don't really get a weapon, you know, Outlast, while the graphics might not hold up, you know, quite to what they once were, but that's, you know, you have a camera and you have a flashlight and you don't get to fight. The way that you fight is you run, and that's almost, you know, it's that instinctual. It isn't fight or flight. It's just flight. Like that's the only thing you have.
I don't know because Outlast gets a little arcadey. I know it's the way to describe it. Like at certain points where they're just chasing you so ridiculously that it becomes a game very quickly.
Yeah, I mean,
and you lose that. And I don't know if that happens eventually with Resident Evil 7, but I remember there's points at Outlast where you see the monster. And he's like a stupid, like dumb, he's walking into the side of the wall and he's chasing you. Like, oh, okay, I'm playing a game. I think that this Resident Evil game has paced it in such a way that you never get those moments of extreme like action. And I think that's important because I think that's what takes you out of it. It's like when you watch a horror movie and you see the killer in broadest of daylights, and you're like, oh, it's just a dude. It's a dude. Like, he's not everywhere all at once now. He's very much in one place, and he's coming towards you. You know?
Well, I think this ushers in a kind of a whole new era when it comes to horror, because there was a trend that, you know, when you think of more classic games like a Doom, which isn't really a horror game, or even like stupid bullshit CD-ROM games from the 90s, but that was like crappy full motion video or like blood everywhere.
What was that game? Night Stalkers.
Oh,
one for Sega CD.
Night Trap. But like Doom was a game, you know, in the early 90s where they threw a ton of enemies at you, and like you might get scared if one pops out. But they started this a little bit with Doom 3 in the monster closets, but less enemies that are more powerful and much scarier. Because that's if you can just like run around and just cut through everything and mow it down, it's not really scary. But when everything that you encounter
sort of matters when the stakes are very high.
Or almost a boss or a mini boss that takes, you know, a lot where you have to run from because you can't just go toe to toe with it. So that's what kind of makes these scary, and as atmosphere and sound and VR and all that shit gets scary. But it sounds like, Coop, buy or sell on horror VR.
Oh fuck no! No, I have no interest in horror VR.
Are you gonna try Resident Evil 7?
No, I'm not going to.
Like, what about like? I'll be there, Coop.
That makes it scarier, actually.
Why are your thighs so warm?
Will you please tell us in the comments whether we should somehow bait Cooper into this with like a Mick Pick 2
like
or
a
something,
master bait,
but bait him into doing the first half hour or 45 minutes of Resident Evil. Hopefully his ticker can take it.
Oh God, no, I don't know if it can. I will say, like, I'm most pumped about this, like.
Changing the subject? I'm most pumped about changing the subject,
I'm most
guys.
pumped. Speaking of Resident Evil, check out our PSA. No, but I was wondering who was going to plug it first. As a fan of VR, I don't plan on touching Resident Evil 7, but I think it's really cool as a fan of like PSVR and just gaming in VR in general to know, like, all right, I want that same sort of experience, and what you guys were talking about with like the stakes and with like you know, how the gameplay.
I would say a game like
just a different genre.
Yeah, I would say a game like LA Noire, which I guess didn't get as well received because of its pace, in a VR type of environment that you wouldn't mind the slow pace of it because it's so everything feels so heavy and weighted. You're like, oh man,
I love that, and I love that immersion in the atmosphere.
And it's much harder to do when you're like, well, I can run really fast and get in a car and just drive across town, and now I gotta
that's a game.
Now you're playing the game.
Well, and like even to segue into something that we just talked about a couple times this morning, oddly, I don't think it's for VR, but they've announced again this plans for a Kickstarter-funded Apocalypse Now video game, which like sounds crazy to me, but like I would play that in VR.
Yeah,
like
that'd
before,
be cool.
like some crazy, psychological experience, in war and like. The disillusionment of man, like going up a river or whatever. Like that's like more interesting to me than scary and horror and I don't know.
Because that's what good VR. If it accomplishes its goal, it takes whatever the senses are for that genre and heightens them.
Yep. Exactly.
My current drug of choice is Space Pirate Trainer on the Vive.
Phil has the high score.
And when I go in that, I feel like a 5-year-old and live out that fantasy. And when you're moving and you're matrixing around and stuff, and like it takes that what would normally be on a console and to the nth degree. But it does that with horror, which you're like sell hard.
Yeah, because I don't want that. And let me put it this way: I'm so scared of that crap that anytime that somebody comes over and tries my PSVR for the first time, before we play any like the fun games, I make them do that thing where I can't remember what it's called, but Ocean Descent, where you go down in a cage and you get attacked by a shark. And I've seen it like as people have played, I've seen it like 10 times now. So I know when the shark's coming, and I know that you're perfectly safe, but I still have not done it myself. I just make people do it.
So what we've learned right now is that Cooper has revealed a weakness, a very serious weakness, with which we will exploit.
So you are
coming up next.
You're a VR sadist. Is that what you do? You put them in, you're like, get eaten by the shark.
Well, okay, so I give them the choice. You can just go down in the cage with no shark, or you can just
like to do
and
one
everyone
Cooper's
comes over like,
VR
I want the
demos.
shark. And I'm like, you're braver than I am. And they're just like, you're a fucking pussy. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So you say weakness, I say makes my character interesting.
That's an alternate fact, I would say from that. But
all right, guys. So tell us what you think about PSVR, about Resident Evil 7. If you got a chance to play it, are you excited to play it? What are some titles or demos that you got to try? Have you tried the Vive? VR.
And even if you haven't played it, we're curious to what your experience was outside of VR. Because again, it's I don't think it's better or worse. I just think it's slightly different. The controls might be a little bit more easy to digest. And again, this isn't a commercial for it. It's just we got wowed early on. But I mean, Nick was getting a little nauseous, and I could see how the controls might not be great. And if any game makes you fucking nauseous,
it might make you nauseous.
That's kind of a deal breaker, like A1. And also your character's hands, you can kind of see them from like the elbows down, and like 10 times it's like, there's a guy's hand. That's just my hand.
Yeah,
it's
they dangle weird. They're like weird and dangly.
They're just real dangly. So I don't know. Well, we will. I think Nick and I will try to get more of that in. We'll let you know. Let us know what other stuff you want to talk about. Well, maybe we'll talk about some more horror movies for you guys. And if we can coerce Cooper, if there's enough comments down below to watch him play Resident Evil 7, you will tell him he has to do it. And we'll let you guys watch.
I don't well, we're still figuring
Also, check out, we'll have coming up, we're starting a podcast, I guess. Got like a little, if you're in the comic books, we have Comic Book Girl 19 coming to the studio next week. We're going to be talking about Jack Kirby, the life of one of the greatest comic book artists of all time, responsible for the creation of Captain America, the Avengers, Hulk, New Gods, like Darkseid. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah. And again, don't forget, big stuff coming in February. We'll let you know. You'll see it. We'll be talking more about it. But
all that stuff that you have been thinking that would be the best stuff ever, we're doing that in February. So it's
a 30 episode show of Cooper weeping in a corner and going to therapy because of Resident Evil 7.
And you guys can make that happen.
You can make it happen. Let us know in the comments below. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
No, but seriously, do you have like a will or anything, like any heart conditions we should know about?
What if we bring the VR to you? We just turn this into a haunted building. You walk in, the door locks behind you. I don't know.
You don't have the resources.
No, we don't.